All right, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to the Fitness Simplified Podcast. So I'm very, very happy to have a special guest here today. One of my clients, Mitchell Matyas. He's actually an old friend of mine. We've known each other since we were youngsters, and it's pretty funny because we reconvened and really have been able to do some great things. And really, Mitch has been killing it. So I asked him, I was like, Mitch, you wanna come on the podcast, man, and talk a little bit about your journey, because I think a lot of people can find value through it and learn a lot from it. So welcome, Mitch. I appreciate having you on.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No worries, man. And like I said, I want you to tell the people a little bit about what you do, kind of who you are and what keeps you busy. And because you're definitely got a unique profession. I think it's really cool because it gives some people some insight
Yes.
on like, hey, you can make things happen even through a busy schedule. So fill them in a little bit, man.
All right. So I'm Mitchell. I'm 24, originally from Waukesha, Wisconsin. I kind of live in New York. I'm an actor, so I kind of go where the job takes me. So
Totally.
for the past year and a half now, I've kind of been traveling around. I was on a national tour of a Broadway show this past year. So I was traveling throughout 23 states and over 80 cities in the US and Canada. And so I've just kind of been all over the place just performing, which it's been a blast doing what I love to do. So
Yeah,
it's
man.
a lot of fun.
And you went to school out in New York. That's what originally got you out there, right?
I
After high
did,
school,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, so that's why I'm kind of not really located there right now, just I've been gone for so long, but I'll be back soon. But yeah, so I went to Marymount Manhattan College, which is it's a smaller liberal arts school on the Upper East Side in Manhattan. So as soon as I graduated, I went to Catholic Memorial High School in Waukesha. So as soon as I graduated, I moved out to New York City and spent 4 years there. And yeah, so that's where I've been living since I was 18.
Perfect. Yeah. And then like you mentioned, you went on that traveling tour, and then you've had a few different stints in a few different places since then. And then I think when we first started chatting again, because like I said, me and Mitch played baseball together way back in the day.
Sure
Like
did.
it was like middle school, I want to say, right, Mitch?
Yeah, it's probably like seventh grade, sixth
Yep.
grade.
Back in the day, dude. So yeah, so that's how we originally know each other. But yeah, so I want you to kind of tell them a little bit more. But it was in August, at end of August or probably middle of August when we first started talking again. And before we kind of get into that, tell me what was going on at that point, and even you can go a little bit back further as far as you want to. Where kind of has things been for you as far as your relationship with food? Overall, just kind of where you've been as far as past diets you've maybe tried, or different things that have maybe
Yeah.
failed you, that a lot of people, especially listening, might have that same sort of they've been through it too, and they might be going through it now. What did that look like? Because like I said, me and Mitch started in September, so I just want to give you guys a little bit of insight and get kind of an insight from him as far as where he was before we got started, and even before that, Mitch. So kind of fill him in a little bit, man.
Yeah, totally. So I mean the history of diets go back pretty far. I mean I've always been a bigger guy, but I've always been like a very active guy. So I would go on diets all the time, and I would do really well because I was still a pretty active person. So when I was active, and then I would go on a diet where I would, cut out everything that every person likes to eat, I had success, but I would always just bounce right back. And every single time I did that, I seemed to get like a little heavier and a little heavier. So fast forward to this year, I was on tour for 6 months, 7 months.
Give them a little insight what that is like too, because most people are like, tour, okay, cool. Like,
Yeah.
explain that, because
So
I was like mind blown. Where I'm like, that would be hard for me, like anyone to do. So
I mean,
explain that.
basically, I was living out of a suitcase and living in hotels for 7 months. So depending on the schedule of the show, where we were at that night, I could be in, 7 different cities throughout the week, 7 different hotels, or, if we are lucky, we're in one hotel for a week. But I was still living out of hotels. I didn't cook any food, so I was eating out every single meal. I was drinking a lot, um, and it uh, it did some damage on my body. I definitely wasn't at a healthy weight even before I started the tour. So eating out every single night and drinking every single night did not help in the slightest.
Mitch, first of all, I want not to cut you off, but first of all, I want to say, just before we even continue, I want to commend you for first being vulnerable enough to come on here and talk about this, man, because I know this is obviously a point that, I would imagine, and I'm sure there was points before that where it felt really, really hard, both physically, emotionally, mentally, all those sort of things. So thank you for coming on here, man. Cause like I said, this is going to help a lot of people, dude. But so that's great. And I want to, not to, like I said, beat on a a bruise here or anything like that. But like, would you say when you're on tour, the biggest low point where it was like, it just felt so, cause it really, I can imagine for a lot of it, it is out of your control. Did it feel like that was the low point, or like where you're really out of control?
For sure. I mean, I think, well, what was hard about it was also such a high point at that time for me, because, I just graduated from college and I got this like amazing job that, I was very lucky to get, like, right out of college, to get this professional, national touring job.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt so lucky, to have that job. So yes, it was a low for me, but I think it almost didn't hit until once I came back to reality, once I got back to New York. And I was like, wow, that was that 7 months, that really did something. So yeah, there was times on tour when I was like, I just need some chicken and vegetables right now. It's hard, like, when you're just like,
You can't cook. Yep. You gotta,
when you can't cook and you have to rely on like a TGI Fridays and a Chili's every night. It's not too easy. So yeah, so I guess that kind of answers it. I definitely felt that, but like I felt it most afterwards, after it was all done, because there was such a high of me doing that job.
For sure. And I think honestly, a lot of people probably deal with that, right? Where they have a certain success in one area of their life, but maybe another area, it can be so drastically on the opposite, contrasting, that but it's like, it almost offsets it, or one maybe can kind of like mask the other, where you're like, in your case, you didn't really have even time to think about it because you were just on the go, doing the other thing that is like the main thing you've always wanted to do, so.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, no, I think that's super interesting, because I think, that can be something that, like we've talked about, where, it's like that other side of things can only, like, bettering that and getting that under control can only better the other aspect, which is your profession. Like, we know, especially with your profession, obviously, we know that was a big benefit too, and I think talk about what you told me when we got coffee, when you mentioned that, I'm going to totally say the wrong, like, term, but was it like, not a recruiter or not an agent, but someone told you that basically that you wouldn't make it, right? And there was a specific thing they said, which I'll let you unfold for everyone, but give me that, because I think that's just like insane. When you told me this, I was like, dude, whoever that is, we need to find them and write them a strongly worded letter. But no, explain that to people, man, because that's reality, dude.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in a very tough business, and I was in a meeting with with an agent.
There we go. I was right.
Just in meetings to find an agent, someone that I'd want to work with. And, the person was asking me about like certain, roles I'd want to play, and, and I told this person, and every single one I told this person, they were like, no, you won't play that. You won't play that. And she's like, you're too fat to work.
Dude.
And I was like,
Mind blowing.
wow. Yeah. So, I mean, that was what kind of really,
you're working.
I know. That's the thing as well. I was still working. I knew that, here's the thing. I knew what she said wasn't true. I knew that I still could, but there was also a big part of me that was like, well, like, you do have a point. There will only be so many like roles that I could play. You know what I mean? And that's like I guess like a problem within itself, of casting, different people. But, I didn't want that to be the case. You know what I mean?
Yep. Well, and I think what you're talking about, is a total, that's like a very touchy subject right now, of like the balance of like, obviously we don't want to fat shame people. We don't want to like talk negatively about anyone, like but it's at the point where like, if I say that, if someone says the word fat, it's like, well, is that like, is that like derogatory, right? There's like such a spectrum of it. But I think there's also a side of it, is like, obviously that lady, what she said, that's totally out of line. Like, there's no question about that.
Yeah, of course.
It's like, there's a very, a very loving and tender way you have to go about saying that to someone, especially even me, like with my relationship with someone that friends, family, clients, like, you don't, that's just rude, right? But I think at the end of the day, there's also like we were talking about, if you're not like, if you're like, hey, like, yeah, body image, we love everyone, like, but if it's at the point where someone might be unhealthy, right? Or there's just some negatives that might be coming about, besides just, oh, like, let me just be rude and make you feel like crap, right?
Mm-hmm.
That I think is a little different. And I think that's a very, like I said, it's a touchy subject right now, depending on who you ask, and, magazines,
right, totally.
and that sort of thing. Because I think there is a balance, right? And I don't know,
without a doubt. Yeah.
Like I said, that's an extreme example of that, because, you're like, hey, like, this is my life, I get it, but it's like, that's, that's just rude at the end of the day, you know what I mean? But
right,
like you said, that's the profession, I guess, right? So so fast forwarding a little bit, man. So you were then, I think, did we start talking when you're already in Maine, or were you about to head to Maine from New York when we got first talk?
I think I was leaving the next day. So I had been in New York for like about a month, because I was in New York right after I finished the job on the tour, and then I went home for a month, and it was kind of when I, like, the day I came back to New York, I was like, I need to make a change, like, now.
Totally. And I know we were obviously, like, we were friends on Facebook for a while, so we had seen each other, and it was one of those things where, you had probably seen my posts. I think you mentioned that, and seen what I had been doing. What made you at what point? Because I know you reached out to me, actually. You were like, you sent me a message, and you kind of
I did
things. And what made you reach out, and what was kind of that game changer? Because obviously, and then you can talk a little bit more about it, like, you've obviously done, things before, you've tried diets before, so
right.
what was that game changer for you, where you're like, well, let's see what this is all about?
Well, I think, when I got, what happened was I was coming back to New York, and I had to weigh my bag to see if it was 50 pounds or under. And so when you do that, I had to step on the scale first, and then step on the scale holding my bag. So when I got on the scale, I was like, oh my God, seriously? So I was like, I gotta do something about this. So I got back to New York, and this was like probably like the 1st of August. I was like, okay, I gotta start going to the gym. I have to start, like, eating healthy. So, I was doing that, and I feel like I was doing a pretty good job. I wasn't killing myself, but I mean, I definitely was killing myself more than I should have been.
What do you mean by that? Explain that a little bit more.
I guess just like restricting myself,
Okay.
like,
What were you restricting?
only eating, only eating chicken and broccoli for every single meal, and just like
The cliche,
not
almost.
not setting myself up for the most success.
I see.
You know what I mean?
Would you
Set
say
kind of
more short-term success sort of mindset rather
uh,
than thinking long-term?
yes, but also I think this was also one of the first times that I was thinking a little more long term than
Oh.
I usually did. But I mean, so basically I was doing that for about a month.
Mm-hmm.
And after the month, I was like, wow, I still feel like I'm doing this, and I still feel like I want to continue doing this.
Mm-hmm. So you got the
And I was
momentum
like,
rolling.
right. And that's when I reached out to you, because I didn't feel like I was about to bounce back,
Mm-hmm.
but I felt like I would really benefit having help from someone if I want to keep continuing this.
Yeah, like
So
almost
that's when
working smarter, not harder.
right. Yeah, because I would say, like, when I first, at the beginning of that month, and I was like, okay, I gotta get, myself together. I have, it's not like I, went on some crazy weird diet or was starving myself. I still was smarter than I probably have been before doing other diets. But there was just something about this time where I was like, you know what, like, I think this has got to be it.
Totally, dude. I totally hear you. And what, like, obviously my posts and that sort of thing, but like what made you realize, that was, and what got you thinking more long term where you're like, hey, this seems like it would be a good fit. And obviously once we started talking and that sort of thing, that kind of changed up. Because obviously you probably had some skepticism coming in, like, regardless.
Yeah, of
What
course.
did that, what was your kind of skepticism coming in? Like, be brutally honest, like, you're like, oh, dude's never going to talk to me. Like, how is this going to be? Like, kind of fill me in there, because I think a lot of people might not even realize what online coaching really is, or, they have maybe a past negative experience with it, or they've heard someone who's done it negatively. What did you
Right.
feel before, like when you messaged me, you're like, oh, all right, like, what was your mindset and kind of expectations?
Well, I mean, I had a lot of, I think I told you this before, I have a lot of friends who have used this online um, training guy. He works with a lot of performers.
Yeah.
So I know of a lot of people who were working
Doing
with him,
something
and
like that.
I kind of just been like hearing a lot that, like, online training is just becoming more and more popular. And so I figured, I like I knew you, like, we had, somewhat of a past. Um, and I liked the things that you would post on Facebook. Um, so I just thought, like, why not? I didn't, I was like, of course I had, like, will this be worth it? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I had thoughts like that, like, should I actually do this? But, like, you know, I was kind of at a point where I was just like, let's just do it. Like, let's just, like, at that point it was only a month, and I was already like, you've come this far, like, let's keep going. Kind of sad that, like, at a month I was like that, but, like, for real, like, other, diets and stuff, it would be like 2 weeks or 3 weeks. I feel like once you hit that, like, 1 month mark, it's like that's when you kind of have the momentum going, and you can keep going. So that's kind of how I felt before contacting you.
Totally. And I think you're 100% right, where, I mean, there's different numbers out there, but I think it's like 21 days, to build a habit, and it's like 90 days to make it like a lifestyle or like a discipline.
Right.
I think that's totally true, and I think there's definitely merit in getting that momentum rolling. But I think, like what you're mentioning, I think that's so key. And that's exactly what I want people to think and really kind of understand, where you might be able to have success. You probably will be able to have success in your own. Like, I'm never one to discourage people from oh, you didn't buy my coaching, like, just cast you, like, like, here's a
Right.
spell on you because you didn't buy my stuff. Like, I want success for everyone. But it just literally is often someone's, effort. It's not that, right? It's not because they're not putting in enough work, but they're not doing the things that they should be focusing that effort on, right? They're like putting that effort into things that really, might not, actually be the best long-term, or they're even short-term, right? Or like, doing, like, classic example, doing a ton of cardio, right? And then just trying, like you said, eating clean. I'm just going to eat healthier. It's like, yeah, that's good in principle. A lot of good effort through that. And it's like, if you could just facilitate that in a way that's going to be more conducive to, like, directly putting you on the path of where you actually want to go. It's like, well, are you going to run marathons? Well, no. Well, you just want to lose weight?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. Well, then let's do it in this way, because it's going to be a lot better off if that's
Right.
not, you're not trying to run marathons or something. You don't even
Right,
like
exactly.
running? Oh, we don't have to run. Like, I think that's a big thing. And that's what I would say. And I want you to kind of elaborate on that. But would you say the big thing once you got into it, like, what was that game changer for you of, like, kind of maybe less thinking, overthinking of things, and, like, more reassurance? What did it look like when you got into it and you're like, okay, obviously it was probably maybe a little overwhelming at first, like, kind of fill me in once you were like, all right, let's do it. And I think, by the way, I think that's so key. You were just like, there wasn't really much. Like, obviously you want reassurance, who I am. We talked a little bit, but you were like, it was
Mm-hmm.
you that had to decide. It's more like, I'm committed.
Right, exactly.
And that's, I think, big. You're like, dude, you just got to go. You got to go in with it instead of just waiting and like, oh, well, maybe tomorrow, or like, it's like, nope.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's go. Let's go all in.
Yep.
But,
exactly.
But fill me in. So when you got into things, we signed up. You were, we kind of talked a little bit. When you got into it, maybe like the first week or so, how did that feel? How was everything sort of mindset wise? Kind of give everyone an idea of things there.
Yeah, I mean, well, I will say that before, working with you, like, when I was at the gym, I'd probably do like 45 minutes on the elliptical.
First.
And then, like, first, yes, not second, first. And then I would do, some machines. There would never really be a rhyme or a reason. There was like a few machines that I would, do often, but there was not too much strength training in my gym sessions. And I felt like after doing like the first week of like your workouts, it was like that the past times I'd been going to the gym were almost, they weren't a waste, but like I was getting so much more out of my time at the gym. I mean, then that was exactly what I was, looking for, starting with like an online trainer.
Totally. And like, I think, like, you literally just summed it up, where it's like, you don't have to think as much. You can just execute
Right.
things. And as far as like the knowledge side of things, when we got started and we were able to, what was your first, especially tracking? Cause that's something that people always get like maybe thrown off by. Did you track it all ever with like MyFitnessPal or an app or anything before we got started? And what was your mindset on that when I was like, all right, this is kind of how we're going to go about it? Like, what were your first views on that?
I don't think so. The only thing I've used besides like, do you mean like tracking like food and calories, or like or like workouts?
Really, the food and calories, really, at all? Like, had you ever done that? Like, and you can even like, what were some of your diets you had done? Like, what were you trying other than just the chicken and broccoli? Did you do any like wacky fad diets or anything like that, or like greens drinks, or right, like detoxes?
Yeah.
Did you ever do that?
Yeah. So I mean, I feel like I have like tracked calories before.
Okay.
For a while, I was doing it in like my Fitbit. So like that was something that I was used to. It would never be, the longest streak I would have tracking my food would be like 2 weeks. So I never did it for very long. But other like diets I've tried. I mean, I've done like a couple of like cleanses,
Okay.
where like I'd have like, take certain supplements and then have certain like shakes. But Other than that, probably just like, I feel like whenever I would like go on diets, although portion control is like very important and probably something I struggle with, I would probably just like cut my portions in like fourths or eighths,
Of what you
and
were
I
already
just like
eating.
right. And so
Okay.
I would eat, like, it's not just that I was like eating, chicken and vegetables. It's that I would be eating like, you know, 2 ounces of chicken, and everything was just like so small that there was no, I was getting nothing from it. And I guess I didn't realize really until like starting with you just how important like my protein intake is.
Yes, totally. And I guess that's kind of a good segue, man. So like you had a little bit of experience tracking, but maybe not really enough to where it was like, I mean, even then I've had people who track, right, but they don't know, should I track calories? Like, what are these macro things people talk
Right.
about? What are macronutrients? Like, or like, should I track my protein? Like, or like, so there's so many variables with it. But I think that's important because, you were able to overcome the fact that, hey, I've tried that tracking thing before, where some people will write it off again when I'm like, yeah, we're going to do this. And they're like, oh, great, I've tried that. It's like, well, no. It's, you're on the right track with it, but it wasn't necessarily the way we would want to be doing it ideally. But I think that's key. And just one other point about the cleanses and detoxes and that sort of thing, because obviously now you're like, that was, total waste. But just for anyone who's thinking about that, what happened after you did that? You probably maybe lost a little bit of weight, I would imagine, right away. But how did things go, when you did those?
I got hungry.
You're probably, and then did it end up backfiring almost, I would imagine?
Yeah, probably.
Where you're like dying of hunger then, and you're just like,
Probably, yeah.
well, yeah, like I can imagine.
Yeah.
No, I definitely can imagine. But because that's something that, it's like people see that whoosh on the scale and it's like, yeah, if you just drank water all day and didn't eat, that's basically what they're doing, with some vitamins in it and just a little greens drink or whatever different ways that people go
Right.
about it. You're not eating right. It's just like you're not eating at all really. And that's, of course, cut your calories in half or even worse than that. You'll definitely see some weight loss, but it's probably not going to be long-term fat loss. And like you said, the tailspin will be even worse. But yeah, so we got
Right.
started. I got you. And honestly, I don't think we've made any adjustments at all since our starting point, which is funny because like sometimes, I make more adjustments to certain people. Sometimes we don't have to. And I want to kind of have you explain that to them. So you notice, like, so we get into the lifting side of things. First of all, we get you doing a lot less cardio, get you on a
Right.
structured routine where it's not overwhelming, just, I think it's really, we've started, and stayed with the 3 days and really just dialed in those 3 full body workouts, prioritize those lifts and, minimal cardio, nothing crazy after the lift if you needed. But otherwise, just with you, it's, you do so much performing and you're so active. We have a high level of calories burned aside from the workouts already. So what did you realize when we got started lifting and you're like, I'm eating a lot, like the protein's helping? Like, what did that difference feel like?
Well, I mean, definitely with the protein was something I really noticed. Because I mean, that's something that, we talked about at the beginning, like you really wanted me to focus on, make sure I'm getting, hitting my goals for protein. And I definitely wasn't. I just, never even thought about like this much meat has this much protein. Like that's just not how I thought. But, I was starting to track it, and, I was starting to eat more protein and find, different sources of protein that I could add into my diet. And then I was like really starting to notice it in, workouts, and I could kind of, look back to see my days like, dang, this workout really was like, was really tough today. And I kind of, felt a little weak. And like, obviously that's, gonna happen just depending on the day, but it was kind of interesting to see like, you know, I could look back on my days on my fitness pal and see like, well, the day before I had like barely any protein at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so that I feel like that really kind of affected, the energy that I had, at the gym.
And totally. And I think the biggest thing that you basically are saying is the fact that it was mostly educating you on the protein and why it's actually so important and all of the benefits of it, where you're like, oh, and then on top of that, you literally start to notice when you start to track those variables, you have more data to look at. You're like, wow, I actually can see a trend, which doesn't seem like a coincidence, of the days that, like you said, where I'm low on protein, I literally don't feel as good in the gym. And I think that's so key because when you're doing kind of those random workouts and stuff, if you're doing random things, there's really no way of quantifying even progression, right? There's no way of even knowing, oh, that protein intake was higher, I feel better, because you might have changed things so much. And that's where I really try to get people to understand, where like even weigh-ins wise, some people hate weighing in every day, but I'm like, if we have more data, if it's not, 7 days a week for 52, weeks a year, like that's okay. But, at the end of the day, the more data we have, the better it's going to be, just from any standpoint of, trying to figure out and make adjustments as needed. Whether it was, an experiment that we're doing in science class, right? Or someone, trying to lose weight, because you want more numbers, you want more statistics you can work with. And really, that's why progress pictures are so key, and how you're feeling in the gym and that sort of thing. But so you got it. You like started to feel that you're like, oh, this protein intake thing has definitely got some merit to it. What else did you realize as far as when I'm like, hey, like, yeah, you can still eat the foods that you like, obviously we want to think about our health and focus on that 80-20 mindset. But what did that sort of shift in your mind look like? Because that definitely happened too, where you're like, oh, I don't have to eat chicken and broccoli all the time, man.
It did. Well, I mean, I think first of all, there needed to be like a shift in how I was eating, because, I was, eating terribly on the road, and, just always eating out and never eating the right things. So there was still like a huge shift in my diet and the way that I, was eating. But the thing that has kept me on track throughout this whole process, these 6 months, is that like I can still enjoy the foods that I like, and I can eat them like when I want to eat them. I don't need to eat them all the time anymore. Like I don't, have, Domino's every other night. But like when I want it, like when I'd like a couple slices of pizza, like I'll have it. Yes. And that's what keeps me on track, because, before I would be, on some diet, and I would say no to everything. Like I would never let myself have anything. And that's what kind of would make me, bounce back to old habits, because I was just restricting myself so much. And like, it's important it was obviously important for me to restrict myself from certain things. Like I said, I definitely made a huge change in like the way I was eating, but like I still let myself enjoy the things that I enjoy when I know it's time to. And that's the key thing, is like knowing when to do that.
Yeah, no, I totally think that's key. And obviously, someone listening to this might think right off the bat, well, that's just his willpower. He's developed more willpower. But I think there's so much more to that, where you've educated yourself on the caloric nature of certain foods, why healthier foods are not only going to benefit you from a health standpoint, but also from a caloric density standpoint, where you could literally eat more of them and not feel like, oh my gosh, I'm way over my calories now and I'm not even full. I literally want to eat again. That is, I think, so key. And what you just described is mindful eating in itself, right? Where it's like, yeah, I could literally have pizza anytime, any day that I wanted, right? There would be a lot of negatives from it. But at the end of the day, I'm being mindful about when I'm choosing to eat that pizza or whatever that food is. And I think that is key also, because you're looking at it from the standpoint of, I got to enjoy my life. Like what's good for my soul, what's good for my, enjoyment of like friends and the friends and family and life. But also got to look at the side of things where like, like I know you've had it happen where people, kind of peer pressure you a little bit when you're out, and you're like, no, if this is something that's kind of a trigger for me, I'm going to be able to be disciplined enough. And it's a win, a huge willpower win and a huge progress when you can say, no, I don't want to have that right now. I legitimately don't. It's just not
Yeah.
something I want, right? Like that is so key. And I think that is like the biggest sort of win and like, you know, actual practical win and progression, you know, besides the scale and all that stuff. It's like, that's fun. We love that. But your ability to take care of those situations and literally, like I said, that's mindfulness right there, and take initiative there. I think that's so important, man.
Mm-hmm.
And quite frankly, I think that's the biggest game changer, because it's like, at the end of the day, it's not that the pizza's the devil, right? It's not that the pizza's
Right.
a negative, and I keep using pizza. It's literally my favorite food. I love
I
it.
know.
You know
Me
what I
too.
mean? Or like ice cream or like cake, right? Any highly palatable food. The reason, and if you don't know, and I know you probably know this, Mitch, because we discussed it, but those highly palatable foods, they're very rewarding on our brain. Like literally you feel good. Like it releases chemicals in our brain that are like, hey, this is awesome. We love it. You
Right.
know, like, and it's funny because most people blame sugar, right? Like sugar's the devil. I'm addicted to sugar. Well,
Mm-hmm.
most of the time, you know, you're not like just going in your pantry and taking spoonfuls of sugar out, right? So it's
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
you know, you're eating something that's carbohydrate ridden, you know, of course, but it also usually is laden with fat. Pizza, right? Cake, you know, cupcakes, cookies, all ice cream, you know, all have fat and carbs as the good combo. That's like, love it. But I always give the description. I'm like, hey, you give someone a baked potato, if they're really starving, they're going to eat that, even if it's got nothing on it.
Right.
But if they're not hungry anymore, they're probably going to stop eating the baked potato. You're not going to stop eating the ice cream, cake, pizza when you're not hungry anymore, unless you've trained over time those cues to be able to know when you're hungry, you know, or when you're not, right? Or when you're full, and waiting, you know, eat a piece of pizza, budget it in your day, wait 20 minutes. Oh, I'm not hungry anymore. That is such a win. And it's hard for people sometimes to find that balance and understand it's not black and white. There's a gray area, which is pretty much all the time you're hanging in.
Right.
So I think that's so important, man. And kind of getting into that, give some people some insight as far as like how you balance that out. Like, I know you say like you have times when, you know, that feels like it's a positive, right? Where you're like, oh, I want to enjoy this. How do you navigate that as far as just a situation, Mitch? And explain to them how much you've traveled and how, like, you know, your environments have changed recently. Even during the time we've been together since September. What does that look like for you? How does that kind of work in your mindset when you're facing a situation like that or going about a week?
Yeah, I mean, I think like the biggest thing I've learned is just to like always be prepared. So like, you know, if it's a week where I know like a lot of people are gonna wanna go out every night and go out to dinner every night, you know, even if I'm at a place where we have kitchen, you know, I always make sure like I always have like food ready to go and snacks ready to go, so I'm not, you know, like in those situations and am hungry and everyone's eating fried chicken and pizza, um, and I'm eating a side salad. Um, but yeah, I think um, just also knowing like that it's okay if one of those nights I want to have, you know, some pizza with those people, and know that it's not gonna kill me if I do, and it's not gonna like put me back to square one if I do that. I think it's just like a big like mental thing, and it's like taken me a while to kind of realize that, and like I'm still, you know, I still struggle sometimes too, but yeah, it's just like a big mental thing, and always being prepared, but knowing like if like you slip up and, you know, you have a little too much pizza, like just get back on it, and like tomorrow it's gonna be fine, because
Dude, can
you're not gonna slip up, and that's not gonna be, you're not just going to go right back to square one.
dude, that is so powerful right there. Like, if I could quantify the amount of actual, like, if it was on a graph of like the importance of bouncing back, and like
Mm-hmm.
if you could like quantify that ability, you know, I would mark that like so much higher on the forms of progression, where it's like dude, and I just want to commend you, by the way. Mitch is 50 pounds down working with me since August 29th, and he is, it's got to be over close to, it's got to be over 60 pounds, right?
Yeah, it's 65.
65 pounds. So it's not to say that isn't badass. Like, that is key. Like,
Right.
of course.
Still going though.
Yes, we're still
not
cruising.
done yet.
But the point being is the ability that he just said, and he's still working on it. We're all still working on it. We're only human. But at the end of the day, that progression from just saying, yep, things happened. It wasn't ideal. I went over my calories. I didn't eat mindfully, or, you name it, insert a problem here that you're beating yourself up about. Mm-hmm. Stop beating yourself up. It's not going to do any good. But get right back on the horse, because if you get right back on the horse, I always say you're one meal away from being on track, 1 meal away from being off track.
Yeah, exactly.
Just start again and learn from it, of course, but don't dwell. Don't beat yourself up. Kickstart yourself, but don't just sit there and put yourself down. And like I said, that progression, you doing that, and it might happen dozens of times, but the ability to get right back on track is what's going to keep you, eventually moving in the right direction. Consistency, not necessarily what's happening 1-2 days or 1-2 meals. That's the big thing. It's interesting. And I want to ask you, Mitch, did you ever struggle? And I know you talked about it a bit. Was binge eating a very big issue for you?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I never, it was never something I really, thought about, but I think that was part of the problem. It's something I never thought about. It just kind of like always happened. So yeah, I mean, I definitely think I was a big snacker, a big, could probably eat a whole pizza, like.
And really the big thing is, like, did you ever have a time, and I think you've described it to me, and that's kind of why I brought it up, where you actually ate past the point of, like, where you feel literally sick and you keep eating type of thing?
Yeah, for sure. I feel like I've definitely been there. It's just like, I can't think of like a specific right now, but I've been in situations. Totally. I mean, just like any time we'd go out.
Yep.
Like,
you feel like you need to finish, or like, right, or like get dessert.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And then you just feel so stuffed and terrible.
Yeah.
And I've been introduced to the to-go container, and I can actually take part of my meal and eat it later.
Yeah,
it's kind of great.
Totally, dude.
But yeah, no, totally. And I mean, although I do feel lucky. I feel like I've, like, grown up, still had a very good idea of like whole foods and like good foods for me. So I think I've like always been like set up for success. It was just like, as I got older, like choices I, made kind of like, hurt me. But I think what's really kind of helped is that I've always kind of had, a good idea of how I really should be eating and the things I should be putting in my body. So just kind of like expanded on that, and that's just kind of how I've been rolling.
Well, exactly. And I think, honestly, that's where a lot of times people, of course, there's obviously a learning gap, and, people don't always, know what is going to be the best nutritionally, especially with all the misinformation and things we have out there. But at the end of the day, I always tell people, and it sounds so easy and like just like basic, but it's like, it's the common sense things. You know what I mean? Like, you have all these different things related to politics. You have so many polar spectrums, right? There's like people are just like one or the other, and that's just how it seems to be. Same with nutrition, where it's like, there's just like, oh, you got to be vegan, or you got to just eat meat, carnivore, right? Or like, you got to go keto, or like, no, carbs are awesome. Like, it's like, why don't we just find that middle ground, right? Like, that seems like a good area anyways, right? It seems like it makes the most sense, get the best of everything. And that's where it's like, when you're making those decisions, it really comes down to being a little bit more mindful, being obviously educated on it. I think that's the biggest bridging of the gap. Because even you, like you said, we're like, I knew the basics, but like, like value of protein, right? Or like how, that relates to calories, and like where that kind of fits in the spectrum of things. Or like, okay, for you, for instance, we're down a good amount of weight. Okay, is this just going to keep going this way for the rest of time, right? Like, just stay at these calories forever? What happens then? And I think that's so important. But yeah, and I think what you're mentioning as far as, right now, where it's like, you're feeling those positive benefits from it in more than one way. Obviously you're seeing results. Obviously that's a huge huge positive. But I think you're realizing in terms of that also kind of your behavior and discipline, that sort of thing, habit wise, those are the really big wins, because that's what's driving those actual results. And I talk about it a lot, where those actions every day, everything you're doing. And Mitch is one of the killers in my Facebook group, who is literally on point almost every day with his check-in checklist. And essentially what that is checking off every day the 4 biggest factors that is going to be literally the wins for that day. And it's like, okay, how do you break down this big goal, right? We want to lose a large amount of weight. We want to build a large amount of muscle. It feels daunting. A lot of our goals feel daunting, but break that down every day. That adds up over time. Literally, Mitch is the exact example of that, and a killer because of it. Like, I love it, and that's why it's just so important. But he's literally down 65 pounds since the beginning of August for that reason, because he's able to understand that every day, slow improvements are going to be what gets you to that long end of the day goal, and really keeps you from not being overwhelmed by it.
Exactly.
And wanting to give up, which is normal human nature.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, this dude is just a huge example of what you can do when you bridge that gap of education, you commit all in, and you really get that overall system down. And I mean, yeah, I help him keep it accountable, but he's putting in the work, you know what I mean? He's executing, and that's really the biggest thing. I was talking with one of my other clients, Mitch, and he was talking about how, he's like, hey, like, give me kind of some feedback. And I literally stopped him. I was like, by the way, dude, and it's the exact situation for you. You're so on point with all your variables, right? You're not perfect, but you're really damn near, right? Like, you're on point with staying consistent. That allows me, along with your feedback, to consider, hey, what do we need to do? And I think that's important to talk about, where, we've been at things for a while now. Literally, we haven't made any adjustments at all. Things have been exactly the same. He's obviously increasing protein over time, which that is key. I think that's a big reason. So one reason, okay, you increase your protein, that helps with your hunger. You're not as hungry, slower digesting. So that's going to benefit you there. So as he got more into it, he got more used to increased protein intake, keeps his hunger at bay. And I think that's also another important thing, where he's keeping that caloric density style of foods limited, because then he can eat more and not feel as hungry eating that X amount of calories. So I think that's big. Mitch, would you agree?
Totally.
Yeah. And I think from there, dude, other than that, I mean, it's really just finding that balance of yourself where you're able to understand things and see kind of where that goes. And from there, we've never been in this drastic cutting of calories. Like when you go on a cleanse or a detox, or you eat, 1,200 calories a day, how is that going to fuel your workouts? And I think that's the biggest thing, where if you are able to fuel your workouts positively, you're going to eventually find that sweet spot of a little bit of a deficit, getting the weight loss rolling, but not having you starve yourself or feel miserable, or be like, like you're just literally, you're literally deprived of food by the end of the night because you're just so hungry. I think that's the biggest thing there, man. And so overall, like I said, is there anything you kind of want to touch on with that, as far as, where you're at now, as far as, why you think you've had the most success to this point, man? What do you think you would attest it to? I know there's a lot obviously involving there, but if you kind of had to pinpoint it a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing is just like taking it day by day. I mean, like, I obviously have, long-term goals, and, what I, numbers, what I want to look like, what I, want to achieve and do. But I really think just like taking it day by day, meal by meal, workout by workout, that's just kind of how I found the most success. And it's kind of like helped me like become more like just present as a person too, which is kind of cool. So yeah, just like taking it one day at a time, knowing what those goals, those long-term goals are, and still, looking out for them, but just focusing on, the now, and that trusting that will, eventually get you there.
Yeah, I think honestly that can sound so hippie or like cliche or like live in the moment.
Right.
Like it's like, but it's so true though, because like, especially for someone like you even, and I can relate, right? Being like basically someone who, and you don't, just to clarify, you don't have an agent. You're the one who's doing your job searches, right? Like, so I can relate, owning your own business essentially, you're you. And that can be a lot, you know? So I think just overall, there's just so much merit in that, where it's like, you know, if you can understand, you know, that every single moment, just one day at a time, literally taking it step by step, you could just sit in your room all day and think about the future and just like, oh my God, you know, the anxiety just boils, you know, like, it's like, we can do that to ourselves so easily. And I think I've realized working with many, many people, the mental side of it is just as important, if not more important than the physical. And that's where I literally I've had people where I'm like, let's not even worry about working out. Let's just worry about the nutrition. Let's worry about you sleeping right, hydrating yourself. Then we'll throw in some workouts, because most people have it backwards. And that's where, you know, again, it's just so important to, I think, live in that moment where not only is it going to help you right now, because it's just, you're going to enjoy your life more, literally, but you're also going to help your cause for the long term if you're focusing on those right things. And I think, I don't know, I think that's, like I said, man, that's so, so important. And like you said, it's interesting that this is what has helped you kind of, like you said, find a little bit more peace in terms of just day to day, you know? So, as far as if you were to give someone advice, maybe someone who's in your shoes, before we got started, man, or before this past summer, what would you tell someone? And this is just in your total opinion, what would you tell someone who's in those situations? What would we, and this is just very brief, if you kind of had to just give it to someone where they're like, yeah, I've been struggling, I've tried everything, it feels like I just can't do it, man. What would you tell them as far as just some general advice if they were asking you, man?
Well, I think, first of all, don't just cut out everything in your life that you love if you think that that's what's gonna help you. I mean, look at the things and how you can fix it, but don't ever do something that you know that you're not going to be able to sustain. So finding something that is sustainable will be the number one thing, and that will give you the most success, because otherwise you're just going to keep bouncing back and forth, and then just take it day by day. And one day will turn into a week, which will turn into a month, which will turn into 6 months, which will turn into the rest of your life. So that's kind of what I would say to myself.
Yeah, dude, honestly, I think that's perfect, because I think the number one thing we want as humans is we want things now. We always want it now, whatever it is. And that's the hardest concept to understand when you're trying to lose weight, or you're trying to reduce body fat, or you're trying to reach this physical goal for yourself. You want it in a month, you know, you want that 10-year body in a month, right? It's like, that's something that you really have to grasp. And I think that's so key. If you sustain it, if you ask yourself genuinely, like you were mentioning, can you, like a year from now, do you see this being something you're still doing? You know, obviously there's variability in there, you know, for you, for instance, we're not going to be eating this amount for the rest of our life, but that's, you know, still within a foundation. And it's like, can you eat things you like, and can you find a healthy balance? Well, most people can. Yeah. Okay, great. Then that's going to be where we got to start, you know, versus, like you said, focusing on the wrong things, restricting yourself, and then sending yourself into a tailspin that's even worse than where you actually were before you even tried something. So, yeah, I mean, is there anything else, Mitch, that you want to touch on or describe to people, or just give any more insight on before we go, man?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I guess just that, like, I am like very happy with like the success I've had so far, but like no one's a finished product. So like I still have like a ton of work, a ton left to do. But like still be proud of like all the progress like that you do make, and I'm proud of the progress I have made, but I'm definitely ready to keep on going.
Exactly, dude. And I think that's totally, you know, something to take a lot from, where it's like, you always want to look back, you always want to see that progress and be very proud of it, because it can remind you a lot when you feel like, oh, maybe things are stalling out or life's a little rough at a certain point. It's good to look back on that. But again, Mitch, that's why he's doing so well. You know, he has that mindset of, all right, today, you know, is right now, this is happening, everything's going well, but also, you know, I want to keep moving forward in the right direction, slowly but surely. And that's so important, because it's, you know, you're not hitting this place where that's where like I hate using the word, and you can use it in two contexts, like going on a diet or your diet that you eat every day. It's like when you go on a diet, okay, I'm going on a diet, which means I'm going to come off the diet eventually.
Exactly.
Right? So
yes,
it's like,
for sure.
You're just setting yourself up for that kind of like, all right, I'm at the goal date. All right, now take off the, the reins. Like we're fine now. Like, it's like, that's a recipe for getting you back to square one, if not worse.
Yep.
So
Yep. Definitely.
this was awesome, Mitch. Honestly, thank you again, man, because this is going to help a lot of people. And there's a ton of value within this. And I think overall, really, like I said, it's really just something that kind of getting into the mindset and getting kind of some insight from you, I knew it was going to be awesome just from our conversations already. So like I said, thank you. I appreciate it. I know
of course.
you, and thank everyone else. Especially if you're still listening, I appreciate you. And if there's anything else you would ever want, Mitch to come back on and talk about, we could definitely go in depth on more things, because I think really just, kind of give you an update even as we continue to kill it together. That would be awesome. So let me know below,
definitely.
Or shoot me a message on Instagram or Facebook. And thank you again, Mitch. And thank you for listening. No worries at all. But I appreciate everyone listening. And this was another episode of the Fitness Simplified Podcast. Make sure you do subscribe, like, and turn on the notification bell if you're watching or listening on YouTube. But otherwise, if you guys have any questions, like I said, let me know on Facebook or Instagram, and we will catch you guys in the next episode. Take it easy, guys.